Hello, welcome to today's lecture. We will be talking about what to include in a scientific report. Before I proceed, I would like to briefly explain what a scientific report is. So, a scientific report is what gives the detailed description of the aim, background to the experimental investigation, the procedure to which the experiment was conducted, the result or output from the experiment, as well as its addition to science. Scientific reports are extremely important in the sense that scientists are able to use this in communicating their theoretical and empirical basis of the experiments they conduct. Also, readers are able to understand the importance these experiments are even without having to repeat the experiments. For most scientific reports that have the methods and materials outlined, even non scientists can be able to replicate the experiment and validate the authenticity of the methods and the results from the experiment. Also, when these reports are documented, they serve as reference for further research. The first thing you are likely to see in a scientific report is the title. The title is usually a short but very concise information that gives the reader an idea what the experiment is about. The title can also give information about what the predictor and the response variables of the experiment are, as well as the experimental organism. The title should be simple, concise, and in itself complete. There could be incomplete or wrong titles, and I have listed a few here like seed germination, listing your class, and just adding lab report to it. So if it is a Bio 151 class and you are submitting your report, you just make it Bio 151 lab report, or even if you shorten the scientific names, these are wrong and shouldn't be done when you are putting your title together, as well as adding non scientific openings with a conjunction like a report on, a study of, result of, an experimental investigation of. This doesn't necessarily make it wrong, but it is not important. You want your title to be specific and right on the nail. I have listed here a few good titles among the many titles you can have for your scientific reports. So the first one is Action of Light on Lettuce Seed Germination. Right from the title, you are able to know what the experimental organism is, which in this title is the lettuce. You can also know what the predictor variable is, which is light, and the response variable, which is the germination of seed. The second title, we have Influence of Light and Temperature on the Germination of Passiflora incarnata. And the same with that, you can know or identify the experimental organism right from the title, as well as the predictor and the response variable. And the same also for the last title, which is Light, Salinity, and Temperature Effect on the Seed Germination of Perennial Grasses. These are very short, concise, but complete titles you can put on your report. The introduction of the scientific report, which can also be referred to as the background to the study, broadly describes the main terminologies that will be used in the experiment. In the introduction, Authors usually give account of previous works relating to the experiment in question and then narrow it to the research gap that the experiment will cover. There are usually three important questions that the introduction answers, which includes what the problem is. Why is it important that we find a solution to this problem? As well as what have others done already in trying to tackle this question. From the introduction, we also have the aims and specific objectives of the experiments, which in some scientific reports is infused into the introduction. The aim of the experiment answers what will be done specifically for this experiment. Whatever the case may be, the aim describes what will be done specifically for the experiment in question. It is also supposed to be smart, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. Here is an example of a scientific report. And here the authors begin by saying something about the importance of seed germination and vigor to stand establishment and crop plants, and goes on to explain what the problem is in the second sentence. Under rain-fed conditions of arid and semi-arid regions, low temperature and low moisture often are limiting factors during germination. They also end their introduction by stating their specific objectives, and they list them as: 1. To determine the effects of low alternating temperature and moisture stresses on water uptake, germination percentage, and speed of germination of 4 wheat cultivars commonly grown in Lebanon. The next section that follows the aims and specific objective is usually the methods and materials section, which is composed of the materials that were used in the experiment as well as the procedure to which the experiment was conducted. The most important thing that should be noted in the methods and materials section is the flow of the steps to which the experiment was conducted, as well as listing the equipment that were used and quantifying the materials that were used. So having specific quantities or measurement for the materials that were used. The methods and materials section also includes the statistical test that was run on the data or will be run on the data. Also, do not list the methods. You want it to be written in a paragraph form that flows from one sentence to the other, and avoid using personal pronouns like we, I in the method write-up. The results section describes the pattern in the data and also provide key findings and explanation of the visuals, which can be in the form of figures and tables. You also would want to discuss the figures and tables you include in the results section by referencing them. For example, writing that as shown in figure 1, or even include a descriptive sentence and put into brackets figure 1 or figure 2 or whatever figure you want to reference in the write-up. You would also want to always communicate your results in the past tense and in the active voice. Also, the figures you include in the results section should have axis titles. People should be able to make meaning to the figures right from reading the axis titles and the caption you give to the figure. So you don't have to necessarily add a title. Instead, you can use the figure caption, which describes what you have shown on the graph. Your graph should also have keys, if appropriate, preferably by the side of the figure. The discussion section, which I see to be one of the most important sections for the report, is where you analyze, interpret your results, and identify possible improvement. So simply make meaning to whatever data you gathered from the experiment. And the first way to do that is to interpret the results. Why do you see the results or pattern for your experiment? So you build on these observations that you made on the results section and connect them to the concepts you established in the introduction. Another part to fill up in the discussion is connecting your results to previous results or findings. And by so doing, you compare or contrast your results to results of other studies. In the discussion, you can also discuss the pitfalls of the experiment by answering questions like how might the data be biased? Why might we need to replicate the experiment, and what should be changed for the next experiment? These are some questions that you would want to also address in the discussion section, and also add what other researchers can do in the future. So what is next? What are some of the questions that still needs to be addressed from the results you gathered? And what additional information would be needed to draw more detailed conclusion about the study? Then after the discussion, you would conclude your report. The last thing that goes on the report is not the conclusion, but rather the abstract. The abstract is a small version of the report, and it usually stands alone on itself and all summarizes the ideas and information that was gathered in the report. It answers briefly what was done in the experiment, how it was done, the results, the major results that were obtained from the experiment, the significance of the results, and some quantitative values or data that were obtained from the experiment. The last but not the least important thing to include on your report is the referencing. So whatever article used to support any of the ideas that you put into your report, you need to put down the reference of that article to at the bottom of your article. So that is the last thing that can't go on your report, if not before the abstract. And there are different forms of referencing there. We have the APA format, the CSE, and other very wonderful format that you can use for your reference. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. See you on the next video.